Back. You already know what time it is. It's R3's time where we read. I'm Naila. I'm your CEO, your founder of R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. And what better way to do that than to read, write, and comprehend for your own overstanding or understanding? But we are now reading African Glory. This has been an excellent book so far. African Glory is a book about the story of vanished Negro civilizations by J.C. deGraft Johnson. That is Mr. J.C. deGraft Johnson. And again, remember, this book has given us fascinating details and a very quick overview about the glory of Africa for the new reader or for a reader who wants to brush up on their information and their skills. Most books on African history, according to the summary, is a concentrate of the colonization of Africa and on the institutions developed there by European missionaries, traders, and technicians and colonial administrators. So we're able to learn a little bit more about Africa for the Africans. But we'll get back to that. I'm going to pass it over to our hostess with the mostest. She's going to go ahead and recap for us last week's a little bit of what we talked about, and then we'll go ahead and jump into chapters 5 into 6. We'll introduce the Vandals, and we'll be introducing the Muslims conquering in North Africa as well. So last week was about Christianity, and she's going to recap for us and give us a few little quotes and pointers, and we'll see you soon. Back to you.
I am back as always. It's Howard So, the hostess with the mostest. And we are reading, I have my book today, African Glory, the story of the vanished Negro civilizations by J.C. Johnson. Now, this book is very interesting, and I think that it gives you a snapshot of actually what happened during Christianity, during Africa and other places, with the rise of Christianity and the fall, because I'm not going to call it a risen. But let me get to the basics. Let me get some business out the way. The business of R3 Realized Book Club is to promote knowledge of self through education and activism. So if you want to educate and you want to activate your brain, your mind, your soul, then tune in every Tuesday at 3. But more than just tuning in with us Tuesday at 3, we implore you, join us. Come on in. You can get to us at R3, go at R3, at R3 Real Lives, which gets you to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and to the website where you can like, share, and follow. All of that is free. 3 things you can do for free. The one thing that does require a fee is a donation. You can donate $1, $10, $20, or 0, all the way up. Any amount you need, you can donate. We have active campaigns. We have a scholarship right now, Willie J. Mills Foundation scholarship that we have established to give a scholarship to a worthy student in the community. We have homeless outreach, and now some of those homeless outreach projects are drive-by. Carry stuff in the trunk of your car, get a sandwich for the homeless, have clothes and socks available. So just check us out at R3 Realize, and also you can join the book club, and you can message us on the book club during this live here on Facebook, on Instagram, to the website. Also on the website, remember, at R3 Realize, where you can register so that you can get updates on our weekly, monthly, yearly campaign and on our latest book reading, and see links to videos that we do offer at R3. Now, I'm a little behind the times. I was reading chapter 4, and this coincidentally is a North African church. And I find that great because we were in Ethiopia where we saw some grand churches carved out of the rock. And that just shows the perseverance of those early Christians and those early leaders to actually dig a rock and make a church out of a rock, and just one slab, a mountain. But I thought that reading this chapter gives you some insight into Rome, gives you some insight into the African leaders who went to Rome, because a lot of times we only hear about Julius Caesar. Well, he was one of the last Rome persons, and he was a Roman dictator, a leader, or whatever he was. But there were other. He went to England, but we find out that Julius Caesar didn't conquer England. He came, he went, he saw. It was just like me visiting Ethiopia. I didn't conquer anything. I went there and was like, whoa! And then I went back home. And that's kind of what Julius Caesar did to England. But there was, I can't remember his name. Naila, help me please.
Septimus Severus. I can't see it. It's backwards. I think I'm saying it, but
yeah, I'm not looking at it right now.
Go ahead.
I was an African. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
An African ruler of England, and his rule included order. So while he was there, he believed in order of the military, and that's how he was able to stay strong. And after his death, that's where you saw the secession and the degrading of England in the military and other things. But I'm talking long and strong. I just saw something on here as this reading that I thought was interesting. Now, I am not a connotator like my dear friend, daughter, Naila.
And I'm sorry to stop you. Page 33, he's mentioned. That's where you are, I think. Septus Severus, second paragraph.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, then, I did connotate Naila today.
Oh.
And I am not a connotator, but I felt like this statement
Good.
that from the early Christians was important. Well, it resonated in my soul because I thought of this. And I will read it. It's on page 45 in the final fourth of the paper. And it says, their reinstatement, the history of Rome in its proper perspective. This involved the reinstatement from the Christian's point of view and of the ancient idea that man is a citizen of two cities, the city of birth and the city of God. On one side stands the earthly city, the society that is founded on the earthly appetitive and possessive impulses of the lower human nature. And on the other side, the city of God, the society that is founded in the hope and heavenly peace and spiritual salvation. I just thought that was a strong statement in how they walked the path in two worlds, the earthly world and the godly world. And that shows the flaw, I think, in man, where we can do things and say things, and at the same time in the name of God. Like we have wars and we want to kill people, but in the name of Christianity, in the name of Islam, in the name of Buddhism, we're doing that because we're walking in two different planes of life. So that was my little 2 cents. That's really what I really wanted to say today because I thought that was very important.
Well, I would like you to finish reading that to the end. That's a good paragraph you pointed out. Just finish reading that, if you can.
Well, let me put my real glasses on then if I'm going to read the whole thing. Hold up.
Oh, just the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the first is the kingdom. The first is the kingdom of Satan, beginning its history with the disobedience of the angels and the embodying itself, especially in the pagan empires of Assyria and Rome. The other is the kingdom of Christ, which embodied itself first in the Hebrew nation and later in the church and the Christianized empire. History is the dramatic story of the struggle between the two societies and the ultimate mastery, which must fall to the city of God. Only in the heavenly city is peace possible. Only the spiritual kingdom is permanent.
Thank you. Anything?
Yeah, yeah. So back to the business. I'm going to give it back to the kid in a second. But at R3 Realize, if you want to hear more, you want to listen more, you want to read more, you want to study more, just at R3 Realize, and that will get you to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and to the website. Back to you, kid.
Okay. Somebody's always calling when I need to not be answering. Okay, that was a great point that you pointed out, reference you pointed out. So I love that. That was on page 45, the last paragraph. And I wanted you to read the whole thing because when it said only the spiritual kingdom is permanent, that's kind of what I want to get into now. Because as we're talking about religion, for me, regardless if it's Islam or if it's Rastafarism, if it's Christianity, these are separate ideals or practices or religious bodies used to captivate a mind and take control over one's mind or spiritual regard. A lot of times when we're speaking of Africa, we like to put them in either Islam or in Christianity, but we don't understand that Africans, before they were called Africans, had their own spirituality, had their own type of spirituality. We're going to leave that word in there. So that's a good reference to leave it off of. And that pushes us into learning about the Arabs conquering Africa and entering Africa and pushing Islam, right? So we're in chapters 5 and chapter 6 last week, like I said, and what our host with the Moses just discussed was Christianity in Africa. Now we're going to be discussing Islam in Africa. So I just have a few short notes again that we're going to just address, but I want to highlight an individual specifically. There's a term that we're going to continue to hear through Pan-Africans and just with people, period, trying to bring highlight to African unity. But a lot of times we don't mention the women who are very prominent in unifying Africans. So we're going to mention her here, but the term Africa for Africans, literally the final standoff to make Africa for Africans is going to lead us into this Islam conquering of Africa and pushing back. And we're going to talk about Queen Kahina, but that's in chapter 6. So I'm going to go ahead and speak about it in chapters 5. Who are the Vandals? So chapter 5 is the Vandals in Africa. And just briefly, we're not going to read that. Who are the Vandals? The Vandals were the Germanic tribe. They first originated in southern Poland. So clearly we can get their ethnicity there. They first originated in southern Poland, and then they established themselves later on in North Africa around the 5th century. You can find that on page 53 as well. And it speaks a little bit about the Vandals coming into Africa, why they came into Africa is the next reason. So when we're talking about the invasion of Africa by all of these religious groups and these outsiders or people who were not of the Negro race, since we're talking about Negro civilizations of the black race, of the Negro African race, right? These people were coming in to take over, to colonize the mind, colonize their spirituality, colonize their abundance, and inhabit this land and make them convert to their ways of thinking. So we have somebody that jumps into the scene in chapter 5, and it's St. Augustine. St. Augustine is known, let's go to Count Boniface. So Count Boniface actually is a Roman general. So a Roman general, of course, we know, you spoke about it already, but Rome is trying to conquer Africa at the time. So they're sending in different generals, not just Julius Caesar we always hear about, like she mentioned, but we're going to hear about different people. So Count Boniface was a Roman general who sent a letter actually to the Vandals who were conquering other lands. They originated in southern Poland. Just keep that in mind. But he sent a letter for him for the Vandals to come and help him with 5 different provinces in North Africa. So that's you're going to find also on page 53. You'll find that.
Hey, can I say something?
Yes.
I just keep hearing a common thread in an old book that we read, The Count of Monte Cristo, to send a letter to come and conquer him. And wasn't one of the guys like Boniface or something?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good one. That's a good connection. Yeah.
It just jogged my memory. Okay. I think all of the common stories are having a theme that's starting not there, but prior. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
No, I love that. I'm going to actually look into that and get back to you. I believe Boniface is one of the people who helped take him down and put him in jail as well. If that makes, I believe it sounds Boniface. I believe that was him. It was 7 of them total. Or 5 of them total, I believe, in the Count of Monte Cristo. I'm going to relook it up and refresh my memory. I'll let you know later. But good connection, great connection. So yes, Count Boniface is mentioned in chapters 5, and basically he's the one, a Roman general trying to conquer North Africa. He called on the Vandals, these white people, to come into Africa and help him conquer 5 different provinces. The Vandals were actually hated by all Africans period, on the continent. They were hated. They came in. They caused a lot of atrocities, death, destruction. So they were hated by all Africans, and I think that's very important to point out. And then we have someone called St. Augustine that steps on the scene, not necessarily a savior for Africa, but he was in charge of the diocese, and he protested the Vandals coming to Africa. He protested against Boniface and did not want it to happen. Unfortunately, he actually died. On his dying bed, he says this on page 54. So a second paragraph. As the Vandals encircled the city, Augustine laid seriously ill. He lived through 3 months of the siege before he fell victim to a fever. He had to give up his active duties and lie awaiting his end. But even the people flocked to him. There were even those who came to ask him to heal the sick. In short, they demanded a miracle. To a young man who came to be healed, the dying bishop of Hippo, which is his title, said this, quote, "My son, you can see in what state I am. If I had power over illness, I should begin by curing myself. As one historian has remarked, these were typical words coming from the most sincere of mortals. In the end, he slipped away quietly, away in silence, broken by chanting of the Psalms, and before the city was given up, thus died Augustine, Bishop of Hippo, in 430 at the age of 75. The city fell in 430, and with its fall began the rule of the Vandals in Africa. So that's where we can clearly see the passage of Christianity going into the Vandals' hands, okay? So I just thought that was very, very important to point out for that. Let's see, what other notes? Chapter 6. Okay, on page 55, just a few quotes. So I wanted to point out this paragraph because I find it interesting that just in context, we consider humans as property or booty, which is called, property and stuff. And I think that's just very important that it was a man named Genseric. He brought with him from Rome many articles of great value, including a golden roof of the temple of Jupiter and Capitolinus, and the sacred vessels from Solomon's temple of Jerusalem, which had been brought to Rome by Titus. So we just came from Solomon's temple, actually. I'm sorry, not Solomon. We just came from Ethiopia, learning about Ethiopia and Cush and the great Queen of Sheba. And then we have entered in here with Solomon's temple of Jerusalem that was taken back to Rome. So you just see in these aspects of taking things from Africa that weren't theirs, that had very much spiritual connections, and taking it outside of Africa so that Rome can have ownership of it. And it just shows you how it was very strategic in colonizing not only the land, but also the mind. On page 55, it also says, let's see, the fourth paragraph down, we have seen how Genseric treated Rome and those who governed her. How did he treat the conquered Africans who once formed a part of Africa Romana? He gave all the richest African nobles to be slaves to his son and chief followers, and distributed all the best lands among the Vandals. These lands became known to history as Vandal lots. The African people were forced on the poorest lands, and these were so heavily taxed that life became a burden. And if you think about that in a modern concept, it's still the same thing with redlining and things like that. African people of a darker complexion, the Negro race, is always pushed onto poorer lands. They're taken off of their fertile lands, and they're giving nothing, and then they're taxed for having poor lands, which causes a burden in life. And then it was very interesting that this statement was pointed out because, again, I already quoted it, but it's on page 55. And it's the second to last paragraph. It says, the Vandals were hated by the Africans, and the African poet Draconthus was thrown into prison for describing his life under Vandal rule in these words. So for using his real truth, his real eyes, and his real voice, he was actually thrown in prison just for saying this. So he would be an early revolutionary to me. But he says, the chains wound me. The tortures overwhelm me. Poverty wastes me. I am covered with rags. People who knew me and strangers turn from me. My life is oozing away. My parents know me no longer. My many slaves have fled. My clients despise me. So it is said that the Vandals remain a distinct group, and that they never merged into another society, nor were transformed or modified by travel, but kept themselves always apart, and that eventually, through their very inability to adapt, they perish. So staying to themselves, basically, they end up perishing out of Africa, which is a good thing for us. So let's see. But I like to point out, because in a lot of religious texts, you always hear how my people are destroyed due to a lack of knowledge. In the Bible, it states, right? Or they talk about how basically Africa is going to be a desolate land, but they never talk about the people who came to a fertile land to make it desolate. So I like how this chapter actually points that out. On page 56, it says that the Vandals, they found Africa flourishing and left it desolate, and with its great buildings thrown down, its people reduced to slavery. And the Church of Africa, so important in those early days of Christianity, practically non-existent. So this is where the fall of Christianity was happening, and the rise of Islam is taking an occurrence. Let's see. Okay, so now we're going to kind of skip over. That was just the Vandals in Africa, introducing them to Africa. And that chapter was very brief. But I wanted to just make this about the Queen Kahina. On page 6, we're going to discuss, page 6, chapter 6, it is the Muslim invasion of Africa. A lot of times we don't talk about the Muslim invasion of Africa. We talk about Christianity a lot. Oh, you got a flat tire? Our hostess is multitasking here. You have a flat tire? I mean, luckily you have all the tools in your. I mean, why do you even have that? Anyways, okay, so I'll get back to it. Unmute whenever you want. So chapter 6, we're going to just speak about Africa for Africans. This term was actually coined and became popular by the Honorable Marcus Garvey. And also on our trip to Ethiopia, it was actually referenced a lot, Africa for Africans. But what I find funny is always, we always refer to men as keeping Africa for Africans or defeating or trying to fight off invaders of Africa. We never really speak about the women. So we have women in mind like Cleopatra, and we always think about Queen Sheba. But how many times do you hear about Queen Kahina, which her name Kahina means seer in Arabic. So my phone might die. Let me get my charger. This is why it's not charging today. Okay, I'm just going to have to put you on the side for a little bit. Still here. No, Instagram just won't be able to see me for a while because my phone has to charge. Oh, you know what? Give me 1 second. Oh. Come on. This isn't it. Looking for my... Okay, let me just open this really quick. Keep forgetting I have another one, so. Okay, perfect. Instagram, hold on. All right, that'll do it. That's going to have to do it. Okay. Let's see. Okay. All right, I'm here. Okay, so, yeah, briefly, because I don't want my phones to die, we're going to try to get this in really quick. So just about the Africa for Africans. So I'm just going to skip over. We'll kind of skip back in. Their Queen Kahina, she was a seer. She ruled southeast Algeria from the 7th century to 8th century. She died in the late 8th century, but she was known as the last and final defense against the Arabian Empire, which is never necessarily mentioned. So as the Arabs were trying to take over Africa and colonize them, we have Queen Kahina that steps on the scene, but I wanted to point her out because her chapter is so, the mention of her is so small, but her impact was so great that it's important that we know. So the person to last fight off the conquering of Islam in Africa was Queen Kahina. So I'm just going to read about her first and we'll circle back. So it says that, let me actually read some of my notes first. Sorry, guys. I'm all over today. Okay, so Queen Kahina also, she defeated the armies of Hassan ibn al-Numan and ruled for 5 years. Once the Muslim Empire became strong, the Arabs invaded her again and ended up in her defeat. But the legend says that she was harsh and unsympathetic ruler, and I put a question and said, why wouldn't she be? They always expect women to be soft, to be meek, to be docile, to listen, to be submissive. But when you have a strong woman, they consider her harsh and unsympathetic when she's fighting people who are trying to kill her or conquer her mind. So I thought that was very interesting. So on page 66, chapter 6 is going to enter in Queen Kahina, but it just says here that after, okay, so we'll read, after Akbar bin Nafi's term, it was Queen Kahina. So we'll read from the second to last paragraph. Akbar bin Nafi, second term of office as governor, lasted for only a year. For the indigenous inhabitants of North Africa, finding the rapacity and greed of the Arabs equal only to those of Romans, Greeks, and Vandals, decided to rise up against Arab rule. The North Africans rallied under the banner of one Kusela and defeated and killed Akbar bin Nafi in 682. Kusela ruled as king of Mauritania for 5 years, but in 688 he was defeated and killed by fresh Arab forces. His position as leader of African resistance was quickly taken up by a relative, a woman named Dahia al-Kahina. Under her leadership, the Africans fought back valiantly and drove the Arab army into Tripolitania. The Arab general Hassan bin Numan was successful in capturing Carthage in 698, but his victory was short-lived. For Kahina, rallying the African forces once more, drove Hassan from the city. The position was becoming desperate. However, and Queen Kahina, the brave defender of Africa, ordered a terrible devastation of the fertile districts of the Byzantine, so that the lack of food and shelter might deter the Arabs from returning. This devastation led to the deterioration of the magnificent country, and to this day, the results of the last desperate act by Kahina are to be seen written in the very soil of southern Tunisia. Kahina was finally defeated and slain by Hassan bin Numan in 705, and with her death came the end of one of the most resolute attempts to keep Africa for Africans. So with her death, she was the last person to keep Africa for Africans. She wasn't trying to mix us in. She wasn't trying to get along to be alone. She was trying to fight for her country and to keep her own knowledge of self. It says that she practiced Judaism, but again, that is another religion. And they were trying to convert her several times to Christianity. She lived in the mountains. Her tribe was called the Jahara. Let's see, where is she? The Jera tribe. That's where she came from. A lot of times the Greeks or the Phoenicians referred to North Africa and the people who already were there as Berbers, but that is a name that they gave them. These people came from micro kingdoms. They came from micro nations, and they had their own understanding, their own knowledge, their own ancestors, their own spirituality. So I think it's very important that we point out Queen Dahia and Kahina, and we add her to our list of great and mighty queens, and she is the last attempt to keep the entire continent of Africa for Africans, trying to push back against Islam conquering. So let's see. We're just going to read just a little bit. Let's see. In this chapter, you should have read. Okay, so we're just going to read about some of what this religion was happening. Oh, I'm going slow today because we only have 10 minutes. So on page 60, this is why we're talking about religions. So page 60, the third sentence, it says, these new religions were creed religions. The world was confronted with a new word, orthodoxy, and with a stern resolve, keep not only the acts but speech and private thought within the limit of a set teaching. For to hold a wrong opinion, much more to convey it to other people, was no longer regarded as an intellectual defect, but a moral fault that might condemn a soul to everlasting destruction. So my grandmother used to always say, question everything. And I always say, question everything, even God. So at this time in this chapter, this is where we see that people were not able to use the knowledge of themselves or their own mind and thinking. It was looked down upon. And we're actually getting back to that time when you speak freely. If you see TikTok and using your First Amendment rights, and a lot of people speaking up and using their own voices is looked down upon. And I wanted to make that connection. And this is where the term orthodoxy was coming into play around the 7th and the 8th century, and causing it as a moral fault to have your own thinking, your own way of thinking, your own thoughts. So that was a good one to point out. On page 62, second paragraph, it says, some of the rulers of the world found in the new creed religions a means of using and controlling the wills of men. And so that's why I stated it began, because before colonization of the land happened, colonization of the mind was very prominent and taking place. And this was to a mean of using and controlling the wills of men. And this starts with the Roman Empire, Constantine the Great. So anyways, it's going to mention Constantine the Great. So really quick before we end, we're going to introduce Islam here in this chapter. We already skipped over to Queen Kahina, so you know her story. But this is where the Prophet Muhammad, blessed be his name, all out of respect for those who actually worship Islam. But this is where he enters the scene and sends a letter to the great prominent kings of the land, and telling them that you must convert over. I'm the last and final prophet of the one true God, and you should follow my way. So it's on page 61, the second paragraph down. It says, the Emperor Herolicus was in Syria restoring order when a letter reached him. It was in Arabic, and it had been delivered at the imperial outpost at Basra, south of Damascus. It is held that it had to be interpreted to Herolicus, since Arabic was an obscure Semitic desert language. The letter was signed by someone who called himself Muhammad, the prophet of God. blessed be his name. Okay. And so the second to last paragraph, or the third to last paragraph down, the sentence on page 61, it says, Muhammad was born in 571, 6 years after death of the Emperor Justinian, and some hold that he was born in Mecca, though others believe that he may have been born in Medina. And then on the last sentence on this page 61, it says, Mecca was at the time the center of a pagan cult, famous throughout Arabia. This cult centered upon the worship of a wonderful black stone, El Kaaba. So listen here. The remains of an immense meteorite, side by side with the worship of this stone, was the worship of a goddess named Allat, A-L-L-A-T. It was to become the origin of the name Allah, applied by the Mohammedans to the supreme God Allah, acquired a masculine sense, although in its original form, the word was feminine. So I wanted to make sure I get that out and mention the Queen Kahina before. A lot of times when we're talking about religion, we don't talk about who brought religion, and it was men. It was men that brought religion, and they tried to wipe away the monarchy, or they tried to wipe away the woman out of control and rulership, which is why I mentioned Queen Kahina. So even if you are a worshiper of Islam, or if you're a follower of the Prophet Muhammad, blessed be his name, it is important to know that when you're saying Allah, that name came from Allah, which is a feminine aspect of it. And it's just very funny that people immediately just say Allah, and we don't acknowledge the feminine, only the masculine. So it is pointed out there, Allah, A-L-L-A-T. That is where you get the name Allah. Similar to Aman, you get that from Amen Ra, which also comes from Amma, from the Dogon tribe. So just understand, where the woman is taken out, chaos is caused on the land. And that is period, point blank. So let's see. We're going to skip over to page 63. And if you don't know what El Kaaba, there's a black stone. There was a meteorite that landed, and that's what they worship. But the black stone, the 666, the chaos, the dark being, that is still a female. That is still a woman. In the beginning, there was darkness. That was the woman. So on page 63, second paragraph, just to quickly note how much time we got left, 5 minutes, it says, but the people of Mecca were determined to hunt down Muhammad, and war broke out between Mecca and Medina. It is easy to understand the situation. Mecca was already the center of a well-established Arab religion, and thousands of pilgrims went there every year to worship the wonderful black stone El Kaaba and the goddess Allat. And here was Muhammad preaching a new religion, which was to destroy Kaaba and Allat and bring financial ruin to the whole host of priests, government officials, and merchants who made money out of the thousands of pilgrims who came to worship in Mecca. So clearly we see where it was a religion, free will of your own mind, and then all of a sudden a man enters in, and it needs to be changed, and there needs to be financial gain and things like that. So it's important that we understand why women fought very hardly, also in Africa, to keep the natural order of things. Let's see. Anything else I want to add? Oh, okay. And so something my grandfather already told me, but it's pointed out here for you guys. So everybody talks about Prophet Muhammad, blessed be his name, but you don't understand that if Prophet Muhammad was a prophet, then the person who followed him must have been too. And that would be Abu Bakr. So on page 64, they make mention to Abu Bakr, which is very important. We'll talk about him a little bit later. I have about 4 minutes. Second to last paragraph, it says, these are the things that made Islam a power in human affairs. It has been said that the true founder of the empire of Islam was not so much Muhammad as his friend and helper Abu Bakr. If Muhammad, with his shifty character, was mind and imagination of primitive Islam, Abu Bakr was its conscience and its will. Whenever Muhammad wavered, Abu Bakr sustained him. And when Muhammad died, Abu Bakr became caliph and successor. And with the faith that moves mountains, he set himself simply and sanely to organize the subjugation of the whole world to Allah. And so just put that into perspective and keep that. And so we'll end there. And so with Abu Bakr pushing Islam across the world and getting them to go from worshiping or acknowledging Allah, the feminine aspect, they went to go worship Allah after the Prophet Muhammad, blessed be his name. But Queen Kahina stood firm against all the caliphs, and she fought back until her death. And we want to make note of that because she had her own freedom, spirituality, and she wanted to keep that for herself. So I'm Naila. I'm your CEO. I'm your founder of R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives. We are now reading African Glory, the story of vanished Negro civilizations. okay, by J.C. deGraft Johnson. It's very important to use your real eyes and have a knowledge and understanding of self first before anything else. And just understand that the Muslims invaded Algeria. They invaded Africa just like the Christians, which is why you need to think twice. You have 2 ears to listen, 1 mouth to speak, and 2 eyes to see. Use them wisely. I'm going to pass it over to our hostess with the mostest. She should wrap you up. We have 2 minutes left. It's on to you. If she can. She's
okay. Hey, I'm hot. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. You're frozen, but go ahead. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. You're frozen, but go ahead. Yes.
I was so the hostess with the mostest. Oh, okay. Hey, you can catch us at R3 Real Live, where you can get us. Am I still frozen?
Keep talking.
Facebook,
It's okay.
Instagram, TikTok, and the website where you can donate, like, share, and follow for free on all the platforms I just told you about. We're currently reading African Glory. Come catch up and read with us. Next week we should be chapter 7 through 9. But you're welcome to join in and comment on any chapter. Every Tuesday at 3. You will be the first to know. I'm Howard Soap. But before we go, since we don't have any chance of losing a sponsorship from Starbucks, I just want to know. I tried to be fat at Starbucks. Not to do with the reading, but if you want to see it, let me know. Is the cake pop supposed to be raw? It's literally raw. I was trying to get something like, and it's raw. So, is it supposed to be raw?
No, it's not. It's going to hang up on you.
It's my bad. But anyway, at R3 Real Live, see us, and back to you kids. Go.
All right, so we are R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. We will see you next week, Tuesdays at 3 o'clock p.m. Now reading African Glory. And don't forget about the African queens who kept Africa for the Africans. Peace, or we say 3. All right.